Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Evazine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Evazine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off.
Blast off on another epic episode of the Hyper Anomalous Esoteric Research Organization podcast, Hero Paranormal, broadcasting from Space Wolf Research in the heart of shapeshifter territory in the Uinta Basin of Utah, just south of the old Sherman Ranch. My name is Ryan, the anomalous ambassador of the airwaves, bringing you an epic episode tonight. On today's podcast, we have someone I've wanted to talk to for some time, Jordan LoneBear. Podcaster and entertainer, Jordan is the podcast host of Scary Stories to Tell from the Res, which can be found on Anchor and other podcast formats. He is a local from the Uinta Basin of Utah. He also hosts one of the greatest wrestling podcasts around. Jordan is extremely familiar with the indigenous lore and Uinta and Ouray Reservation, which is located in the Uinta Basin of Utah. He's conscious of the philosophy of the trickster and has heard his share of stories about skinwalkers and high strangeness. There are dimensions to the secrets of the Uinta Basin only local researchers are aware of. Legendary entities have roamed this land for 15 generations, according to the Ute tribe, and the evolution of making contact with these entities has changed, rocketing us into a new era of superstitions, science, mythology, and symbolism. We delve deeply into the secrets of the Uinta Basin and stalking the scary stories to tell from the res. Jordan LoneBear, welcome to the Hero Paranormal Podcast.
Oh man, you made me feel really good about myself with that intro.
Thanks, man. It's well deserved. Well deserved. I can't wait to get into things. I love that you are a Uinta Basin local, because so often we have people that just, the weekend warriors, or they'll have an experience or two, and they'll try to explain it in terms that they understand. But the reality is, for those that are not familiar with the Uinta Basin, I mean, when the sun goes down, and actually sometimes when the sun is up, things are a little strange there, or it's just a little different than other places, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. I've grown up here my entire life, and it's been really fun to hear the stories because as kids, we were told, I'm actually an enrolled member of the Ute Mountain tribe, and I grew up here. And our lore that we have is tied to a lot of the supernatural stuff that's around here. And so hearing all these stories from everybody that's not, from here, but also from around, Indian country, the United States and everything has been really fun. But I definitely got to give you that, because I've seen some stuff. I've heard some stuff even during the daylight out in this area. There's something out here.
Yeah. There is a presence, like an energy. It's like a shift that happens when you cross into certain areas. And it's hard to explain to people that aren't familiar with those, like that dimension of truth that is the Uinta Basin. I've spoken with, I love talking to the older residents too. And you're right there at the heart of a lot of what goes down. And I've spoken with a lot of the older residents, and, they have so many tales back in the day of, like, when they were working in the oil fields, or, things they would see or hear. How did you get into this awesome podcast that you have? And before we move any further, let's tell our listeners about your podcast and where they can find everything that you have going on.
So Scary Stories to Tell from the Res is, like he said, it's on the Anchor app. You can also find me on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel that I've been doing quite recently, and there's a Spotify and Google podcasts, if I remember right. Trying to get all these, trying to keep my brain going with all of these, just because I've got other podcasts that I do. One that I've taken a break from, which was a passion project originally, was my true crime podcast, One Missing, One Murdered, all Indigenous, which is basically a true crime podcast that dedicates itself to true crime involving Indigenous people. And I've gone through and interviewed people, family members of the people that have gone missing over the years, and I've gotten to sit down and tell their loved one's story, and as well as giving them a chance to come in and tell us, what it's been like. But I've had to put that one on hold recently just because of some personal issues. It's a podcast that I really love just because there's so much lore into it. There's so much passion and a lot of emotion that goes into that, which is draining, both as a content creator and as a person to hear these stories. But I've had to take a break from that one, but make no mistake, it will come back soon. The last one that I just launched was a wrestling podcast called Talking Kayfabe. That's been a real passion project of mine, because I love professional wrestling. Outside of scary stuff and true crime, I'm a big fanboy of professional wrestling at heart, and I started that one just recently, and it's been fun. I've been podcasting for the last, I think 2.5 years. One Missing, One Murdered was my very first project that just turned 2 back in April. So, but you guys can find all of that stuff on YouTube. We also have Facebooks for every one of them. And a quick shout out to the Three Nerds Walk Into a Bar podcast that I'm part of as well. I've got a lot of spinning plates here, so.
That's awesome. Man, passion projects are like that, and I love that title, One Missing, One Murdered. What a great title, man. It is hard being a content creator, and you've got, like you said, a lot going on. There are some spooky stories there on the res. How do we want to kick this off? Do you want to, I don't know. Where do we go from here?
Well, a lot of the way that Scary Stories to Tell from the Res works is that I'm always searching. It's been this one also is very passion driven, but it's also very listener driven. I depend on all my listeners to send me stories, to tell me their stories, their encounters. And when that happens, I'm able to, if you send them in, you can write them out. You can also record them audioly. I'm on TikTok a lot. I'm always searching for stories there on those platforms. And just like, today, I'm able to swapcast and talk to different people and hear their experiences from the reservation across Indian country, because even if you're not Indigenous, even if you don't live on the reservation, you've definitely driven through one. You've had something happen. And I guess I can ask you, what has been one of the craziest things and scariest things that's happened to you while being within the reservation?
Yeah, man. I would say that I'll just start with the first thing that really just got me absolutely, it's almost like changed my life. And that was back in the late 90s. I was a fly fishing guide up in Dutch John, Utah, below on the Green River below Flaming Gorge. And I injured my foot with a strange goings on. I'll just go ahead and go into that. I had a buddy that had found these glow-in-the-dark rocks there in the Uintas. And I went out one night. I had the bright idea that this would make a great little rock garden in front of the house because it glowed. And I saw a light coming through the trees. I thought, oh man, maybe I can't do this. Maybe it's a forest ranger. I dropped one of the larger rocks and it broke my toe. Well, it was not a forest ranger. It was a light in the trees that ended up going up into the sky. But I didn't think, too much of it. I just thought, this really sucks that I have a broken foot now. And fast forward, I had some time on my hands. I couldn't work. I couldn't get the foot wet. So I went looking for new areas to fish down in the Uinta Basin, which there are some honey spots. There's some oases, as you know, where there's some great fishing. Yeah. And I just happened, one of the times during that time period, I happened to be going down a random ranch road. At the time, there were no gates, no fences really to speak of. And it was just south of Bottle Hollow Reservoir. And yeah, I wasn't familiar with the lore or the stories that came out of that region. And it was kind of off the, radar back then. Nobody knew about it. And I saw what I can only describe as someone elderly kind of shuffling robotically down the ridge line, down that rocky outcropping down towards the road. And they had like a Native American blanket over their head. And as they approached the roadway, I rolled down my window and thought I'd be the Good Samaritan. And I said, "Hey, can I offer you a ride somewhere? Are you okay?" They said nothing. They mumbled a little bit. They climbed into my truck. And within about just 2 or 3 seconds, Jordan, it's like this thing was just going through my mind, is what it felt like. It felt like it was just kind of flipping through the highs and the lows of my life emotionally, like whatever it could get that it enticed it. It was like feeding off, like archonically off the good stuff and the bad stuff. And I lost a little time. Fast forward a few hours later, I was surrounded by Bureau of Indian Affairs officers around my truck there at Bottle Hollow. I was back at the reservoir, and I was kind of like hanging out of my truck, but my seatbelt was holding me in. And I was sort of catatonic, so they woke me up, and they asked me what had happened. And I came right to, and I just figured, you know what, I'll just be honest, what the heck. And I just told them exactly what I had experienced. And they didn't seem, what really spooked me, they didn't seem all that surprised. They, and I remember them saying, "This guy got nabbed by the skinwalker." And that's the first time that I heard that term, and it sort of haunted me ever since.
Ooh, man. That's really, really chilling, just because my last episode was hearing from an individual who was down from the Four Corners area, talking about how that I think it was that they were an officer in that area, that they had run into a man with a blanket, a native man with a blanket, and they were told to just leave him alone. God, that's extremely interesting, because when it comes to the Skinwalker lore, you hear a lot of big dog, it was a big dog, it looked like this, it looked like that. A lot of the times when you encounter something to that effect, it seems like they're already transformed. They're already in their whatever form that they've chosen. Very rarely do you ever hear stories, at least in my experience, ever hearing of them before they transition, before they make that different jump. So that's really, really spooky to hear that. I'm very familiar with that area. I grew up there, and I used to go, I take my kids fishing there, or fishing and swimming in Bottle Hollow area. And as teenagers, we would go drive in that area to just go hang out, and we would go overlook the reservoir and the lake and everything, and we would watch these orbs that would fly around out there. To us, they were just lights, and we thought it was really cool. But that gives me chills.
Mm-hmm. It's such an interesting, it's a magical area. And man, it is, the stories that I've heard from people working out in the oil fields and even down 9 Mile Canyon. And for a lot of the listeners that aren't familiar with the area, I mean, this area is thousands and thousands of acres. And for example, 9 Mile Canyon has the longest and largest petroglyph arrays of anywhere on the planet. And then you have places, that are even closer there to the center of the Uinta Basin, where there's very different petroglyphs and pictographs that can't be found hardly anywhere else. I mean, I think of, Dry Fork Canyon and you name it, all around Mighton, up in the Uintas. There's some very, very unique history and cultural artifacts and wall art that you don't find anywhere else on the planet. I mean, it's pretty wild, isn't it?
It really is. I've actually worked in the oil field. I've worked there for over 10 years now. I've not only growing up here, I worked in that area, in the 9 Mile area. There are places out in the oil field. I won't mention the company names because I don't know how that works for them. But in the oil fields out there, just south of the Fort Shane area, there are places that have been undiscovered with petroglyphs. I know that as a water hauler in that area, I would consistently find different rocks that were stacked unique. Now, I'd heard the stories of what they're for, but I'd have to be reminded because I know that there's places out there that just rocks are just randomly stacked in a really weird order. But I was always told that they're there for a reason. But there's a lot of activity out there in the oil field because you would think that because of all the machinery and stuff like that the whatever's out there would calm down, but it seems like it's sort of fed into the energy that whatever is out there, what lies out in that fields, it feeds off of the energy that's coming out of the ground and that's being stirred up out there.
Totally, 100%. I was thinking the same thing because it's such loud clamor. I mean, lights, drilling. You would think that anything that was mysterious would avoid that at all costs. However, it's almost like it's fearless of anything. And, I remember talking to a gentleman, his parents owned one of the stores there in Vernal. It was his last name is Ashton. And he told me about being out in the oil field. He's older now, but this was years ago. And he was driving a truck, like you said, and he just kind of was really tired and pulled over towards the side of the road. And he said it wasn't long before he heard something walking outside his truck, and then it was pushing on his truck. And these trucks are big, and this truck was moving around. And, he was young and in his prime, but he said he was scared to death, and he started the truck and kept on moving. It's wild. I mean, yeah, and that's not like that fair. I find that absolutely wild. And he was telling me that's not that unique of a case. Like there's a lot of stories like this.
Very, it was interesting because when I first started hauling water, my older brother hauled water and for years, and he's part of the reason why I got into hauling water. It was one of the things that he explained to me that both him and my father they worked out there, and they would tell me that there would be instances where you work in the oil field. There is no 9 to 5 clock. Yeah, I mean, you're out there until the job's done, or you're out there before the job. At all hours of the day. But there would be instances where you would be out there having to load even straight out of the river. And the way the indigenous community looks at water is that it's life. It feeds life, and that so you would assume that everything needs water, needs that energy, that life that it gives. And with that being said, you would have to. I was told that if you ever had to load out of the river at night, to stand with a shovel. You're equipped with a lot of tools, and they were like, stand out there with a shovel, and because you never know. Not just wildlife, not just not predator wildlife, but there are things out there that will stand there. They'll either watch you. I've heard instances where there's been something that gets just close enough to seeing you. I personally have an experience with that as well. I've told that story 100 times on the show. But there's something to be said about being watched out in the oil field, especially at night. There are things out there that tend to watch you and while you're doing your job.
And it seems like people can sense that watching. It's just so creepy. There was an interesting story. A guy that I used to fly fish with, he was going to medical school, and he was like super good shape, way better shape than I was. And we'd fly fish, and he would tell me that his grandfather would go out and kind of, I don't know, commune with these lights in the sky, so more or less. And he would tell his family, like one day, like they would talk about, oh, I don't know when we're going to bury you. Like, where do you want to be buried? And he said, you won't have to worry about that, because what'll happen is I'll just go out and one day, they'll take me. And they all would kind of laugh about it. But one day this guy did go out. They eventually found his car, but he was nowhere to be found. He was an older guy that couldn't, get that far from the car. They found nothing else. They didn't find his clothes, his wallet, no footprints, nothing. He was just gone. And, it's stories like that, I mean, they freak me out. Another tale and is right out of Dry Fork Canyon. Have you heard the one about the witch up Dry Fork Canyon? Have you heard that one, Jordan?
I don't think that I have.
This one is super crazy because it kind of brings in sort of that witchcrafty element. And, they have Remember the Maine there, which is, for listeners, it's sort of a tribute to, if I'm not mistaken, soldiers who had fallen in past wars. And in particular, I want to say it's for the boat during Pearl Harbor that had a bunch of Utah soldiers on it. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn there. I think that's correct. And to describe this canyon, it has really steep, almost vertical cliff faces, and it's very, very large. And the story is a guy, basically law enforcement found a guy who had jumped off of there and committed suicide. He had neatly folded his clothes at the top of the cliff, and it takes a long time to hike up and around to get there. And this was on the west side of the road, if I'm not mistaken, and he'd neatly folded his clothes, jumped to his death. And the police investigated it. They couldn't find any foul play. They moved on. Well, 6 months later, another guy did the same thing. They neatly folded his clothes, jumped off the same area. They investigated, and the law enforcement officials found that these two guys had the same girlfriend. And she was supposedly a known witch, and I believe also a meth dealer. And they still could not kind of connect the two because she was nowhere near these events when they took place. But, from an occult perspective, kind of an esoterically looking at this, it seems like the guys were sort of under some kind of mind control when they did this, just because of the neatly folded clothes and the almost exact same behavior. So that's kind of a freaky one, but I don't think they could do anything because there's no way to prove that she had anything to do with it.
Yeah, that seems like a really hard chore to try to connect. I mean, the only connection, like you said, they had that everybody knows would be her as an individual. But I mean, like you said, if it's down to the folding your clothes, hiking, was it the exact same spot that they had jumped from?
Almost exactly, close enough to make them very weary of the whole thing.
That's it. I mean, that would be, unless he was led to that exact spot. I mean, I'm leaning towards the supernatural of it, because coincidences, I mean, we all know that in true crime, there isn't that many coincidences.
Yeah. And speaking of true crime, your One Missing and One Murdered podcast, do you have any tales from that happen to come to mind?
It's really a challenge when I go into the true crime with indigenous people, because there are a lot of the challenges that you deal with when you're reporting these is, lack of information, lack of care, to be frank about it. But there have been instances where some of these cases happen that just don't seem to make sense. There's the vanishing. There was a case that I've been investigating for a while that she was a girl from the Navajo Nation, and she had medication that she took regularly, And one day she just got up, said she was going to go meet a friend, which she didn't go meet after the fact. And she basically just vanished into thin air. That happens more often than not, that our people just tend to vanish out of thin air. I know that there is a lot of, trafficking, human trafficking things and stuff like that, to which has always been, I've found that you can't rule it out, especially with this case. I think it was in the 70s. I can't recall whether or not I covered it or not, but there are a lot of cases out there of Native people just tending to either disappear, or they end up they end up found deceased for really odd reasons. It's easy to jump to foul play and stuff like that, but there are cases, as far as I've seen so far, I always keep an open mind about it, but so far there hasn't been anything that has jumped out at me that screams paranormal, just because from the lack of reports from police and reporters and stuff like that, it's really limited. So I would say that it's just tough to really make a clear call,
Mm-hmm. Totally. Speaking of the Four Corners area, I had the opportunity to speak with Navajo Ranger Jonathan Dover and some of his coworkers who were great. They had some great tales, but it's amazing, the Four Corners, how active that location is, and how a lot of times people know kind of, where the red flags are, so to speak, like who may or may not be practicing the occult. And he was tasked with investigating, among his duties, some of these stranger cases, because it is one of those things where, well, let's say, for example, if I were to jump on the phone and call and say, hey, there's a Bigfoot looking in my window, the cops would laugh at me and probably not come out. But,
Right.
Jonathan was saying that many times very respected members of the community and others would have tales that, in addition to his regular law enforcement duties, would kind of be one step closer to that fringe. And because he knew them personally, and the other rangers did too, these aren't people that would tend to lie. They were called out on some very, very strange cases. And in some cases, he had mentioned that they would show up on site investigating some of these oddities, and they would find, for lack of a better word, other government, I should be careful here, other research people with government ties who were also investigating the same thing, which kind of brings me to like the Men in Black thing. Like, even though it's hard to say, oh, they were Men in Black, they were as close as I've come to somebody that could be deemed that, without going into like the weird factor of the Men in Black, but just people that are usually, rolling around in black Suburbans, have higher credentials than the average investigator. And some of them were even tied to Bigelow Aerospace, which also owned some property in the basin. So I just think that's kind of an interesting tie that Jonathan had mentioned. Sometimes they'd get to these places and they weren't the only ones interested in what was taking place there.
Absolutely. It's really interesting to kind of take that subject and tie it back to the true crime thing. Like, with living in the indigenous community, it's a federal land, and we're governed under federal jurisdiction. And so any activity, whether it is a crime, murder, assaults, things like that, or weird sightings, stuff like that, we are very tied. We're tied very close to federal. And so it's not too surprising to hear that that anybody with any sort of high government clearance or anything to that nature would be present during any of these sightings and stuff like that, because but it really makes you wonder, like, who are these people, who's standing there, like, just, do they have a scanner in their car and just hanging out, or what's going on?
That's what I was wondering. How did they happen to hear about this? And more importantly, how do they happen to perfectly show up at the right time, at the right place? It's, pretty far, whether it's Vegas or Utah to the Four Corners, and they would be there on site. So they either bookmarked this through some kind of, like you said, scanner, or they had a window of opportunity where they were, I don't know. It's fascinating.
Well, to talk about that area, the tribe that I'm enrolled in is actually a stone's throw away from the Four Corners area. I grew up here within the Uinta Basin, but I would frequently go down to visit, and it's really something because you hear tales of, and we're told, not to pick up hitchhikers on that road. I think it was Route 666. I think they changed it. Mm-hmm. But that route runs straight through the Mountain Ute tribe, and there's a sign there that says do not pick up hitchhikers. I might be speaking out of turn, but we were always told as members of the community, like, don't pick up anybody. You see somebody, don't pick them up, because you never know. It's what they always used to say. You never know what or who you're picking up, and I've heard horror stories of them. None that I can recall at the moment, but that area is flooded with a lot of paranormal stuff, a lot of unexplained stuff when it comes to that. So I'm pretty sure that the government or any law enforcement agency knows this, and it's not too surprising that they might have a station somewhere in that area.
Yeah. And that is a beautiful area. If anybody has not been down there and seen Chimney Rock, and a lot of just all of the area is stunning, and even parts of New Mexico, which are close by to the south. There's so much fascinating stuff around there. It's just fascinating, man.
There's a lot of lore in that area too. There's a lot of if you go, I think it's north. My directions might be turned around a little bit, but there's the Mesa Verde, that the area of the people that used to live in that mountainside. There's an energy there. Being there, I used to go there as a kid to just as a museum thing or whatever. But you can feel things. You can feel the energy. For years, I didn't know what it was, but I thought it was just pride or that connection to the earth that way. But there's an energy and residualness that rests in this land when it comes to for years it's laid dormant, and when we as people walk through this land, or they drive through it, they build through it, you're disturbing that, and it gives that energy to the land. As indigenous people, we talk about how we give our energy that way. When we come from the ground, and that we go back to it. So who's really to say that the energy that you're walking on, the energy that you're sitting on right now, that there's energy in that ground, in that rock, in that chair that you're sitting in. So that was just my take on it.
Yeah, and man, Mesa Verde is something else that that needs to be visited by anybody exploring that area. And it reminds me of a story that I got called out to investigate, which is, it's south of there. I wish it would have been Mesa Verde, but it's at the Chaco Canyon, and that's in New Mexico. And the story was that there was, and it's one of these stories, again, like you mentioned, it's so hard to track down the individuals related to this and figure out exactly what happened, because it's one of these government type situations where an excavation was had taken place by individuals that were just there, and they had found, for lack of a better word, sort of a cave going into this excavation, and government archaeologists were called immediately. But basically the rough story was, these locals found this cave. It had, they figured out how to whisk into it, get in there, and there were things on the walls that were very museum-ish. and various mentions of the wing makers is what they described them as. And apparently these government archaeologists came in, they shut everything down, told the people, as you often hear, and this is where it's hard to verify this, but they told them, don't tell anybody about this. This is national security, and the American Museum of Natural History from New York City came out and are residing over this, and I believe some others. But basically, they saw this as well. This was kind of a hall of records of sorts, and they saw these wing makers, and so they literally did like a Google search and found an organization called the Wing Makers, and they reached out to them and they said, "What is this?" And they said, "I don't know. It probably was us, but because it's a different time period and dimensionally speaking, we can't speak to that. We can't claim any any ties to that." And again, it was like very strange because it seemed like there was these elite groups that came in, took dominion over the whole archaeological area. And if I'm not mistaken, the remains were kind of hauled off, and they claimed that these belonged to them, or that this was part of, the conclusion was this was something really important. And you hear these stories, but it's really hard to verify them, isn't it? It's like tough.
Yeah. Oof, that leaves me with way more questions than answers. It's really interesting because why would you as a national park want to know of these things? I get closing it off for preservation, to get to verify that what you're looking at is historically, important, or if it's graffiti and stuff like that. I understand that, but to haul it away or to tell people that to discourage is very it's very suspect, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's weird. There was another story that kind of it reminds me of that a little bit. This one took place in Arizona. I actually heard this through the grapevine that there was again an archaeological college students doing a dig, and it was a Hopi site, and as they were going through, they found some things that baffled them, and among those things were like Tibetan prayer flags that seemed consistent with the era. And it's just one of those, like, they immediately shut it down, like cordoned it off, like, wait, okay, you guys are out of here, you're done. And it's like, wait a minute, that's like a long way geographically, and there's a lot of amazing history with the Hopi, and they're known for very amazing things. And so that I thought, like, what am I missing here? Like, how did they find Tibetan prayer flags among Hopi artifacts in Arizona? But again, one of those stories where I tried to dig in, and it's just so hard to get any valuable information. It's just all word of mouth.
That's really interesting because I just did an episode around the Kachina dolls, which originated in the Hopi culture. So, but to find Tibetan flags, prayer flags, is very, very interesting. It's been something that it was a passion that, like, my mom, before she passed, she got really fixated on learning about where we as indigenous people come from. And I know that they talk about Pangea, and that the whole Pangea thing, that we originated, that people of our the indigenous line or bloodline is stretched throughout the Americas. And so I always had a theory that our people originated from the South and just migrated north. So, but it's really interesting that you would find a Tibetan flag like that. Really cool. I mean, cool. But if it's a prayer flag, I understand, because as an indigenous person, we're very protective of our prayers and what's sacred, what's not, and stuff like that. So,
yeah. And I'm with you on your theory about the migration north. I think I think you're on the right. It's mysterious when you looking at civilization and where they inhabited and how they were moving along. But I'm with you on your theory and your mom's theory. I'm right there. Another strange case I'm sure you've heard of is, for listeners, the Grand Canyon. It's something called Kincaid's Cave. And I guess back in the early 1900s, the Phoenix Gazette, or the local paper, published an article about this guy Kincaid, who basically was exploring the Grand Canyon and said he found like these mysterious, immense caverns that had all kinds of artifacts, some of which even, well, the way he described them, were Egyptian. And what's strange about this is, I've gone down there and done as much, digging into this as you can without, drawing a lot of attention to oneself. But they have literally sort of shut down part of the canyon, and it seems like it's a legendary place. Nobody can really access where he said it was. There's, I think, one resort that's like super elite that you get flown in with a helicopter or something. But oh, wow. it's, and even that I've heard some strange stories about. But yeah, there was a guy, but anyway, you can't fly drones in the Grand Canyon for other reasons that are mentioned. You can't find out a whole lot about it, except that article is still, you can find that online. And so there was something to it. Apparently the Smithsonian came in, and it was one of these similar strange situations where they shut everything down and apparently took it for whatever reason, but hard to figure it out. I mean, we're talking about thousands of feet, a river at the bottom. Really difficult to find the mouth of a cave that's hidden in such an expansive area.
That's, yeah, it still begs the question of why.
Yeah.
It's something that you made me think about this, that in the indigenous culture, in Ute culture, we talk about down there in that Four Corners area, there is what they call the Sleeping Ute. It's the mountain that rests above the Toyoak Reservation right there. And I remember my aunt talking about giants. She went off about giants one day. We were on a trip to the city where we passed over in Heber, the Timpanogos Mountain. The Heber, it rests right there in Heber. And she would talk about Timpanogos and the Sleeping Ute. We have legends within the indigenous community of sleeping giants that exist. But she added to it that, yes, that they exist, and that their reason for being there was that they're protectors, that these giants, that these sleeping giants, they're waiting. And I asked her, so what are they waiting for, Auntie? She said that when the time comes in the end of the world, as when the last days come, that these giants that have been sleeping for all these years, she said that they're going to wake up. They'll wake up and they'll protect us. And there's a reason why we are where we are, because they are going to protect the people. And she used to say the Ute people. So I would, that made me think about that, because of the Grand Canyon so large, that I've heard some stories about there being resting giants in the Grand Canyon. It just made me think about that. So.
No, that's super cool. And it's so mysterious that these canyons, they have such rich history of giants. I'm kind of glad you brought that up, Jordan, because a lot of these giant tales are pretty widespread. And, we kind of spoke about the Dry Fork Canyon petroglyphs. And I mean, for people that haven't seen these, they have really big feet. They have like really different characteristics that you don't see at a lot of the places. And just the area in general. I mean, there's like these mysterious sinks that are hard to describe to people that aren't familiar with the area. It seems almost like there is underground caverns where some of these trails you'll just see where it literally stuff will sink, like the ground will sink, or something that's happened right there near Randlet, Mighton, and Fort Duchesne. I own some property there just south of the old Bigelow Ranch on the border, and sometimes we'll go out there, and I'm sure you've seen this, like the ground will just kind of open up and you get these little cracks. Well, not little cracks. You get these cracks in the ground that will go down like 10, 20 feet, and then you'll come back a day or two later and they're all closed up.
It's almost as if it opens for a reason. I actually grew up for 18 years. I moved off the reservation when I was 18, but I actually grew up in the Randalet area. And so I'm very familiar with the stories that come from that area that we used to talk about. That we as kids would wander the land. We'd wander and do, kid stuff. We'd during the wintertime we'd walk the canals that were frozen. But you would always see interesting things. There are places out there that are, like you said, like little caverns, little caves that tend to just appear for no reason. And we were always told that don't go near them because there's something in there. And it was one of those things that we were never told what was in there, but that you just don't mess with it. You don't bother with it. So yeah, but I'm very familiar with the mysterious holes in the Uinta Basin.
Yeah, and you know what? That's good advice as parents, because I know my wife, when I've told her some of these things, she's like, we have 2 toddlers. And my wife is like, you're not taking them out there until they're bigger. Because, yeah, like I remember one just recently, I got a long pole like a post to see just how, because it wasn't there just a day or two before. And for listeners, the only way I can describe it is it's like a crack in the earth. And you can see down there and you can tell it's more than 10 or 12 feet. And some are less than that, but I tried to push down with the pole to see how far it went. I could not feel the bottom, and I dropped a rock down there. And when I heard it, it's wild that something would open up that is that deep. And then, like we were talking about, you come back a day or two later, and it's all closed up as if it was never there. And if it rains, you can't even find it. And it's like there has to be, I'm no scientist, but there has to be something geologically different about the area.
I would say so. We were never explained why, as an indigenous youth, like you're taught to, they tell us, you don't talk about these things. You leave it be. You don't bother with it. So yeah, we were never educated as to what these holes in the ground were. Just that you just like you said, don't bother with them. Just leave them be. But of course, you throw rocks and stuff out.
I know. I probably shouldn't. When I did it, I actually thought to myself, "Is this a bad idea? Throwing, poking the bear, so to speak, like dropping things in there." But speaking of bears and interesting tales from the Uinta Mountains, up there near Dutch John, Utah, which is just northeast of the state for listeners, really close to where we're talking about, but just northeast. And
it's right below the Utah-Wyoming border, the eastern border.
Yep, exactly. And there were, in the 1800s, there were mountain men up there, and fur trappers, etc., which blows my mind how these guys could, not only make a living and survive, but, they were kind of weird guys. And there were many tales from these mountain men up in the Uinta Mountains of large, hairy humanoids, for lack of a better word. Have you heard any tales from that area?
No. I've heard, me personally, my friends and I, as teenagers, we would drive up the Uinta Canyon areas, which because it lies within the tribal reservation, and so we would constantly drive around up there. But as far as I remember, I don't remember seeing a lot. Probably because I was doing some stuff I probably shouldn't have been doing. But there were stories of people seeing or hearing like loud knocks. You would hear loud knocks on trees. We would constantly follow. Oops, sorry. We would constantly follow lights. These floating orbs within the Uinta canyons and Uinta mountains and stuff like that. So there are so many stories, but the only thing that I personally have never seen or heard anything, which I'm really bummed out because I'm a huge Bigfoot fan. Mm-hmm. I love hearing stories about Bigfoot, and I haven't heard anything so far. I know we just said hairy humanoids, but to me, but yeah, I haven't heard anything from that area.
Yeah, it's strange because like we like there is so many legends and tales of giants in Utah. I think I'm trying to think of all the names of the different caves that people have claimed to have found like historic. And I mean some of these have been verified. Like there was Brewer's Cave, and then there's of course the Lovelock Cave in Nevada. I mean there are cases where I guess some have kind of slipped through the cracks and gotten to the mainstream, and people have actually found these large skeletal remains of at least humans that are pretty big. I mean, I don't know what the line in the sand is for calling somebody a giant or not, but some of these remains are pretty big. And then if you go into the folklore, there's like a whole bunch more that happens, tales of giants found in caves and things of that nature. So I don't know. Like you said, like when I hear hairy humanoid, my head goes to the same place, Jordan. My head goes to the same place.
Yeah, I've been actually asking a lot of my listeners for Bigfoot stories in the tribal lore, because the indigenous community, when we look at a guy, we know him personally. When we talk about Bigfoot, Sasquatch, yeah, it has many names, but we talk about there are different legends and urban legends behind Bigfoot. Not to spend too much time on it, but that the indigenous people believe that it's that he exists as a spirit, as an entity of the forest. I've heard a lot of legends and descriptions of that within different tribal lore. That whatever the Bigfoot is sort of a wandering spirit, sort of something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like a real life. That makes perfect sense, man.
And it's the reason why we, as in this day and age, we can't capture him. We can't see him. We'll catch glimpses, and that whatever it is it's watching. It keeps an eye on the forest in that way. But it's the reason why we can't catch him. It's the reason why pictures don't come out the right way. It's the reason why you can only hear him. You can't see him, but you can hear him. And every once in a while, if you're looking well enough, that you might be able to get a good glimpse of Bigfoot, Sasquatch in that way. And I wonder if, and I've had this just a random thought, not to derail too much, but I've always wondered if trying to open that third eye that we all hear about. I know that you talk a lot about that in this show, mm-hmm. about connecting with the spiritual realm in that way. My wife and I have done that a lot, and it's opened our eyes, our third eye, to different experiences, both within the tribal community and outside of it. And it's been a journey, to say the least, to really advise people that when you do it, though, be ready. You're going to see some stuff.
Yeah, there does seem like there's something strangely encoded in that opening of the pineal gland. It does seem like it, man. Like it does seem like it's an operation that you're able to see more when you're open-minded and that takes place. I agree 100%. And as we wrap up, let's tell listeners once again where they can hear your podcasts and where to find you online.
I know I love these kind of stories. I'm a huge paranormal buff. We'll have to do this again because I enjoy talking about all the scary paranormal stuff. And I've got some UFO stories for you next time we come on.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, again, I run 3 podcasts, both for my paranormal lovers and listeners out there. It's called Scary Stories to Tell from the Res. You can find us again on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. For that one, One Missing, One Murdered, All Indigenous. The number 1 missing, the number 1 murdered, is found both again on YouTube, on Google Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, and I'd have to get my list. I'll send you the links, but you can find us there. And the Talking Kayfabe is the wrestling podcast. Currently, right now, I'm only on Spotify and YouTube. Hopefully, more platforms to come. Three Nerds Walk Into a Bar is currently just on Spotify. So, and you can find us all on Facebook. You can find all of us if you just search up the titles. We're on Facebook. You can email us directly on there, and especially for my paranormal listeners, I'm always looking for stories, guys. So if you know somebody or if you've had an experience on the reservation, let me know. I want to tell them. I want to get the word out there. Hopefully, we can figure out maybe somebody else out there has had the same experience. Maybe you've seen something that you can't explain, but maybe somebody else can. Who knows? But again, thanks, man, for letting me come on here and just ramble.
Yeah, thank you. I love that 3 Nerds Walk Into the Bar. Man, you have the greatest titles for your podcast. They're so good.
I market a lot of my own stuff. It's funny because that's how much time I have on my hands. I swear I need to be into merchandising, which is what I've been doing. You can actually buy Scary Stories to Tell from the Res. You can actually buy my T-shirts. I have merchandise for that one, the 3 Nerds, and the Talking Kayfabe and stuff. I'm currently working on merchandise for that. So,
that's so cool. You're doing it, man. That's so awesome. And thanks again for coming on. We'll have to talk again soon, brother.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. It was too fun. It's always fun to talk about paranormal stuff. And yeah, like I said, next time we'll come on, I'll tell you my UFO stories and maybe some more stories that I haven't told anywhere else.
Ooh, perfect.
Thanks, man.
Jordan is the man. That was so awesome. He was going all the places I wanted to go. Definitely check out his podcasts and his passion projects. He's a content creator with a lot going on. And I got to check out these T-shirts of his. That sounds awesome. And best of all, he's a Uinta Basin resident and local, grew up in the area. Super jealous of that. Randlett is such a beautiful area. Everything there in the basin is so stunning. It's really hard to explain over audio just how amazing of a place this is. He has experiences in the Four Corners as well. Absolutely everything I could wish for as far as talking. I could talk to him forever. If you have not become a patron yet, definitely go to Patreon and support Hero Paranormal. You can also become a patron on Podbean. Go to heroparanormal.com. Lots of content behind the paywall, and your support makes this happen. Great stuff. Thanks so much for listening in. Please support Jordan. And until next time, keep your eyes to the skies, feet on the ground, but don't forget to take a look around.
Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Evazine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Evazine. Blast off, blast off, blast off.